Issue 275. We see Tails being questioned by a reporter on the news about what he thinks of the fact that Sonic was part of the final battle against Eggman, when it should have been pretty obvious from the news footage that he was happy about it. Tails is pretty brave as he finally gets the courage to publicly explain to everyone that Sonic is a hero and he was framed by the Metalics. I feel bad for Tails because chances are nobody's going to believe him and he'll just be dismissed as a delusional idiot. Or at least only a minority of people who are too scared to speak up will believe him. Sonic then goes to planet Drac through the Mobius Ring and sees Miracle Planet there, along with Amy Rose, who shows up near a Mobius Ring and a soldier. It turns out that the Miracle Planet's home is planet Drac. I prefer to think that it's just shared between the two worlds and she just doesn't understand. I mean, it does make sense they'd want to connect Drac to Mobius better so it doesn't feel like just some random alien planet that doesn't belong in the Sonic franchise. But it didn't really work. Sonic says that since he got rid of Eggman finally, he figured it was about time he took care of those who were really in charge. And rather than treating Sonic like dirt, Amy fortunately stays focused, saying that the Drakons are in the middle of a civil war. She explains that months ago, starting with a group of rebels getting a Mobius Ring, the citizens started rebelling against the three houses of Drac. Which makes sense since they had an evil emperor for a long time. It's inevitable. Amy holds a Kid Moby and all motherly-like, saying that they saved her life when the Miracle Planet landed here, because the House of War launched a full-scale attack and she barely got the kids out in one piece. Sonic's impressed that Amy's leading the entire Drakon resistance, and it says they've come a long way from hit-and-run attacks on the back of a circus caravan. Amy says that in just 2 weeks they're going to launch an assault on not just the House of War, but the House of Magic too. Sonic warns her that the House of War was holding its own just fine, not being sure, and Amy says that they've figured out how to make the flying House of Magic follow the sky. Which you'd think would kill everybody in there from like being sent to the ceiling and smacking their heads from the fall, but whatever. They've got loads of Mobius rings and can go anywhere they want, which was foreshadowed by Blaze getting one of the rebels to a ring like that. And they're not expecting it at all. Sonic tells her to be careful. We see Hagra saying that her sisters and brothers have almost completed their spells and she plans to destroy Mobius that way. And since this is an epic story that's being taken seriously, there are no other side stories. It's just one story being continued for the whole issue. Once. Holly says while fighting Badniks with Silver that people can't stop asking about Sonic. And Silver talks as if Tails did a horrible thing by standing up to Sonic, saying he can't believe he did that. Tails makes me proud of him, saying that he should have done it a long time ago, but no time felt like the right one because Sonic was always in trouble. And one of them complains about no longer being funded by rich people. Then Kentobor calls Tails on his wristwatch thing that's way more convenient than something you need to hold, saying that he's been monitoring the route of KBC's egg cams from the past months. He says their suspicions were correct and there was a camera close to the volcano where Sonic fought the Metalics MK. The King keeps the full records backed up to a system not connected to any networks. The heroes will need to physically be in the KBC archives and manually search through all the records to clear Sonic's name. Why did it take this long for this to happen? Meanwhile, as Sonic's fighting some Drakons, Amy finally realizes that everything Tails said about Sonic being framed was true, which was foreshadowed by her being relaxed around him in this issue earlier. Not to mention Tails saying that Amy was testing Sonic, and her asking some kids if they were really saved by Sonic. Sonic says they're not all perfect like him, forgiving her for hating him for most of the comic in the span of just one panel. The Drakon Emperor complains that he doesn't need Hagra's help, and he's called a child discreetly to lampshade his immature behavior. The next day, we see Sonic in a meeting with Amy and the Resistance where they figure out where the House of Magic's hitting next. They end up going to an empty building, and in Metropolis KBC, Tails is looking through the files archives with his friends, complaining that they'd rather be fighting Badniks and guards. Unfortunately, Kane the scumbag shows up, trying to threaten them with being behind bars, and he basically admits to them that Sonic sells more papers as a villain than he ever did as a hero. Then Rouge shows up to warn them about the Drakon invasion. Not that it matters, since when the ground rumbles, she says unhappily that they must be ahead of schedule. Then we see a triangle with electricity above it, with someone saying that the rebels took the bait, And Hagra says, wish my house had been the bait though. Hagra's plan is to drain the entire house of magic with the Mobius ring. And then we see that the Mobius rings were just prototypes, and the original plan for the Mobius ring was to move the entire planet of Mobius to them. With the Chaos Tap destroyed, they can't do that, so they plan to bring Drac to Mobius instead. Don't they realize that the two planets will crash into each other from gravity and destroy them both? Amy sees Mobius heading closer to her on Drac. Rouge explains to Tails with her charming dialogue for the first time that, well, sweetie, I was hoping to ditch this silly planet for a life of fabulous luxury on Drac, but then last night they tried to blow me up, so my allegiances may have changed somewhat. I love seeing her expression in her dialogue. She's like SA2 Rouge instead of boring Rouge, finally. I get why she'd want to leave Mobius since it's got badniks and people threatening it with technology a lot. But I really wish we learned this was her motivation from the start, so her actions would have always made sense, so I'd actually be engaged in her as a villain. After Holly briefly complains that they're not Rouge's team, Rouge says, sure thing, sweetie, now as I was saying, which is also pretty amusing. She's like totally unrepentant. She says that the Drakon's plan involves the floating island and shows them her Mobius ring. Then we see Knuckles and the Chaotix fighting against the Drakons in the Chaos Chamber. Tikal explains that the Drakons have a magical super weapon pointed at them, and Knuckles is busy defending the Emerald Altar above them. Tails and his friends show up, with one of them complaining about not having any weapons to fight the Drakons with. And after a confusing panel with Tails in a green void, Techno shows up with cool new metal gloves that create holograms with menus over them. And she's riding a nice snake at that. I really wish she was like this the whole comic, instead of way too late. Like, this is the big finale! She reunites with Shortfuse, and Tails is happy to see that Amy's alive, with Sonic saying in annoyance, hey, I'm back too, you know. Amy lampshades that she's never literally planet hopped before, and instead of Sonic insulting Knuckles for not believing he was innocent at a time like this, instead he stays focused, and insults him for not firing his super cannon yet instead. By the way, them hopping from one planet to the other reminds me of Futurama. Knuckles says that he tried, but the whole thing is crackling with chaos energy, so it just absorbs the blast. The weapon keeps powering up, and with the rebels taking advantage of the confusion on Drac, Sonic's insult of Pixel Brain is actually lampshaded finally. Amy says, Sonic, when are you gonna admit that Tails has way more than a few pixels to his credit by now? Tails reluctantly agrees, being insecure, and Knuckles doesn't even know what a pixel is. This is brilliant writing. Sonic says kind of heartwarmingly, oh Chuckles, I think I'd miss your sparkling wit most of all. That gave me a huge smile. I'm really glad Sonic got his friends to trust him again. I really didn't think he'd get them back. And the fact that I spent the whole of SEC Online thinking that he would never get to this point, either because he never planned to or because they would stop making issues before then, makes me appreciate this a lot more. I'm glad I wasn't spoiled for this. Omni says that the energy is more than he can handle, and it would fry his circuits if he got close. Tikal says that there is a vague mention in the Echidna archives of a Drakon doomsday weapon, because of course the Echidnas would know everything about what the Drakons make, even though the Drakons only briefly visited their planet, right? This is getting ridiculous. They have literally everything they want in the Echidna scrolls. And Kindabor wonders if the Grey Emerald could repel the attack somehow, while Techno says she could create a Chaos Deflector dish if she had more time. There's a bunch of pink light, a laser almost hits Amy and Sonic, and Kindabor says that the beam is Chaos Tap based, and it's drawing all the magic out of the emeralds and surrounding area. Techno points out that if this continues, there will be nothing left of Mobius, and Vector is naturally upset at the idea of losing another home again. It turns out that his friends removed all of the chaos energy that caused Super Sonic to rampage, explaining why Sonic is unaffected with this much chaos energy around. So while he can feel the energy and use it, he won't go crazy and destroy everything. How does he know this? Why is he talking as if he knows all of this for sure? He's just assuming. Sonic plans to jump into the beam and save the world. Kindabor talks about his experiment to absorb all the evil in the world away, saying that that evil manifested itself as Super Sonic. I love that that's explained. Like, From the very beginning of when I saw Sonic's backstory, I was like, well, maybe the machine exploding near him had the evil kind of absorb into him, which I said was an explanation for why he was a jerk in general, but that also provides an explanation for why the supersonic form is evil. Sonic's impatient about the recap, and it turns out that this chaos energy is neither good or evil. Sonic is all carefree, jumps into the beam, and when a Drakon threatens them all, Sonic plays a not funny prank on his friends, pretending that this will kill him, when what really happened was that he turned super, or rather turned white like a ghost with energy around him like Hypersonic. You know, Sonic really hasn't learned his lesson that he should be nicer to his friends, if even after the smear campaign turned them against him, he still thinks it's safe to joke around like that. It's like he hasn't learned a thing. I'm sure the whole meta logic behind having the smear campaign was to teach Sonic a lesson for being a jerk to his friends, but he hasn't learned anything at all, so what was the point? It just had him miserable for a while. Amy doesn't want to call the Superform anything other than Sonic, getting respect back from him as he casually starts destroying things. Hagra calls out on planning against the entire universe. Suddenly, Eggman talks to Drakons with his head on every screen and says that he hacked his system and hid a virus to shut them down. So how did he get from Mobius's internet to the Drake one? I guess because the planets are so close, it's wireless internet and stuff? Then Sonic mocks the Drakon villains turning on each other, and we get the Drakon Empire problem finally resolved once and for all, as it turns out the rebels of Drac are establishing a Drakon Republic. And since they're not even sure whether to call it the Republic or the Alliance, it really goes to show you that, well, one, these guys mean well, but two, how are they gonna know how to establish a proper government with obviously no real experience with running the planet? I mean, like, I'm pretty sure, like, Cuba got a revolution, and the rebel had no idea how to run the place, and that's how we got this situation. It's heartwarming as we see one of the rebels say to thank Amy because they couldn't have done it all without her, and Sonic says, maybe someday, but first we've got a few things of ours I need to put back where they belong, and brings the chain down to Mobius. Then the next day, Tails goes right up to Kane, bragging that he got the footage from the egg cannon sent after them to the floating island and they blocked its signal. This causes Kane to give him the tape from his drawer that proves Sonic's innocence. Wait, what's so incriminating about Tails' tape that makes him do this? It's not like Kane threatened them and told them Sonic was being framed on purpose on the floating island, like he did in his building. It's not like Tails threatened him with a gun to force him to give him the tape. Tails insists that he's not a kid anymore, and we see the footage of Sonic escaping Metal Sonic on TV screens on the news, showing people that Sonic wasn't that bad after all. Wait, so did the footage show Metal Sonic transforming to Sonic? I guess there wasn't just footage of Sonic escaping the volcano and leaving Metal Sonic behind, but there was also footage of the fake Sonic saying mission complete and stuff. Because otherwise, I'd have to wonder why people don't just say, okay, so that's Metal Sonic, but there's no proof that he actually turned into Sonic. I'm really glad we got to see all this resolved. I never thought that the Spirit Campaign arc would end, because it's a fan comic after all. Who knows when the next issue will be. So for all I knew, the comic would have been put on permanent hiatus before Sonic would get his name cleared. So that was pretty satisfying. We still got 2 more issues left to go, but even without that, this would have been such a happy ending. Not only is the Drakon Empire stopped in its invasion, since Sonic can go super just fine with the pure Chaos Energy beam without going evil all of a sudden, but everyone realizes that Sonic's been framed and has never stopped being a hero. It's actually a really good thing that Sonic stuck around on Mobius then, because he was necessary to put a stop to the invasion. You can't blame me for not knowing that though, and for not knowing that Sonic's reputation would ever get brought back before the end of the comic. Thank God, I thought ever since I learned about that arc that it would never get resolved. And thinking that only made seeing that it did get resolved all the more satisfying. I also like the little moments, like Rouge's snarky and slimy SA2 dialogue as she joins the heroes fighting the Drakon invaders, and the fact that a plot thread with Amy disappearing with Miracle Planet is actually wrapped up way faster than I expected because it simply went to Planet Drac. And Amy's been really useful leading Resistance there the whole time, which is way more satisfying. I thought I'd never see her again. It was pretty awesome, and I can't stress it enough, I felt so bad for Sonic earlier that I love seeing his reputation back. It's just a little annoying that he didn't learn anything from it. He still recklessly pranked his friends, faking his death just as a joke, and no one called him out on it, implying that they're going to go back to being just passive enablers for his behavior. The reason his friends were so quick to think the worst in him was because of exactly that kind of behavior, and he'll never realize that. I also loved Sonic's pixel brain insult being lampshaded and commented on, and even the effects of it being implied as Tails isn't sure that the insult was untrue even now.